A man chooses, a slave obeys.
Welcome to the Ethics in Video Games podcast, where we explore issues at the intersection of ethics and video games.
What follows is a series of graphic, interactive scenes that we can't show you.
It's hard to know exactly what companies do to monetize their users, right? Especially in free-to-play games where they already start in the hole and they're desperate to make a profit. Now, we don't know exactly what companies do, but in 2015, an anonymous free-to-play producer wrote an extremely rare revelation of what was being done. He titled it, "We Own You, Confessions of an Anonymous Free-to-Play Producer." And here's a bit from his article.
We collect as much information about a player as possible. Thanks to Facebook, we have a ton. Even users who don't really use Facebook or fill it with fake data actually tell us a lot. You may not use Facebook, but your connections give you away. If you play with friends or you have a significant other who plays, we can see the same IP address. We learn who you're playing with. When we don't know information, we try to gather it in a game. Have you played a game with different country flags? We use those to not only appeal to your nationalistic pride, but to figure out where you are or where you identify. We use all of this to send you personalized push notifications and show you store specials and items we think you'll want. And if you're a whale, we take Facebook stalking to a whole new level. You spend enough money, we will friend you, not officially, but with a fake account. Maybe it's a hot girl who shows too much cleavage. That's us. We learned as much before friending you, but once you let us in, we have the keys to the kingdom. We'll use everything to figure out how to sell to you. Every day we collect a ton of data. We don't even know the size of what we collect anymore. We have entire divisions to instrument and analyze the data. Every time you play a free-to-play game and just build this giant online database of who you are, who your friends are, and what you like and don't like. This data is sold, bought and traded between large companies I have worked for. That's confessions from an anonymous free-to-play producer.
Right. So the line that gets me the most, right, is that we're essentially, we use all of this to try to sell to you, right? And that to me is really the key thing here. Now, you imagine this was back in 2015. God, I mean, that seems like ages ago. So much has changed in the world today. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that whatever this guy was doing back then, we've advanced a lot since then, right?
That's right.
Now, in traditional sales situations, there's right, the buyer and the seller usually have roughly the same amount of information, right? So if you just got the new PS5, congratulations. You're trying to get rid of your old PS4. I want to buy it. We both know what a PS4 is, generally speaking, right? So we're generally on the same level, but there's this economic term to describe a type of relationship between the buyer and the seller where one party has a lot more information than the other, right? So this is called information asymmetry, right? And these days, right, the more data we have, the more data, or rather companies have, right? The more this kind of information asymmetry can become a really, really big deal, right? Knowledge is power. Companies have a whole lot of information that they can potentially use to manipulate players in order to cash in. And this is the part that we're really interested in today, right? Not simply the fact that they have a lot of money, but the fact that they can use, not a lot of money, a lot of information, that they can use that information to manipulate you to order to make money. Now, we're going to focus specifically about one way of doing that, right? So what's called dynamic reward schemes. And we're going to see how far this information asymmetry might go with these kinds of things and whether maybe players have the ability to fight back. And I really love your suggestion about how this might happen in a way that players might be able to level the playing field more. Let me maybe start by a definition of manipulation, right? Because my concern here is really in the form of manipulation. And here's how I define manipulation. Essentially, I think about it as a way to undermine and intentionally undermine, right, someone's ability to make choices in the normal way that they would be making choices in their own interest. Right? We don't all make perfectly rational choices all the time, but we have kind of regular ways that we try to make good decisions. But in manipulation, you're kind of trying to intentionally interfere with that to undermine this kind of process. So instead of making a good decision for myself, right, I'm making more the decision you want me to make. And there's kind of two ways that this is done, right? So one way is by deceiving me, right? So you're getting me to think that the situation is one way when really the situation is another way, right? So I can't really make a decision for my benefit. Instead, the decision might be made for your benefit because you essentially gave me a false description of reality, the kind of
Sure.
description that would lead me towards what you want me to do.
Sure.
And the other one is you're playing on a person's psychological vulnerabilities, right? And we're all kind of vulnerable, right? In these ways. There's one of the developers I read, I think maybe from Blue Byte. This was like a long time ago. Talked about this kind of way of thinking about players, of categorizing them in terms of the 7 deadly sins, right? Like, some players, they're vain, and if they're vain, you want to make them feel good about themselves.
Sure.
So, right, take whatever tack will make them feel good about themselves in order to get them to spend money.
Right, but is that manipulation, or is that just advertising?
Well,
I mean, doesn't that what advertising does? It plays on these things. Like, if an advertiser for beer might make me think that I should drink this beer because it'll make me look better to the opposite sex. That's vanity.
That's great. And notice, right, when we think about manipulation, the classic examples that people go to in many ways is advertising.
Sure.
Right? Or marketing, right? So now, I'm not one that thinks that all marketing is manipulative, but I think that marketing can be manipulative, right? And it is manipulative when, if you're showing me an ad for a game, and that ad essentially is showing me the game, and the game looks awesome, and that I want a game that looks awesome. I like graphics, right? You're essentially showing me what I want to see, and you're not deceiving me, and you're not really playing on my psychological vulnerability.
Sure. And there have been cases that have come up where we find out that the graphics that are being shown in the ads are the graphics running on higher end computers than the game is actually meant to run on.
Yes.
And there's a lot of pushback on that. That's a lot of there's a lot of community bad will that gets generated by that.
Or the old way that games used to be marketed, where you have the cinematics, and then at some point you get to see what the game is like, but the cinematics really are the things that the player, would remember.
Right. Right. But at least you get that, right? At least you get the cinematics when you buy the game.
Yeah, hopefully though. At least I remember at times it used to be, I think, that it was just in the commercial. The cinematics was made for
just
the commercial
for the commercial,
itself.
so, yeah.
Right? Just for the ad, right? To hype it up.
Sure. Actually, I think that still happens a lot. I see Clash of Clans ads with the very cute little animations, and those things don't exist in the game.
Right. So notice, right? If you're giving me the wrong kind of idea of what the game is like, right? Then you're deceiving me, right?
Right.
But to go back, right, to the psychological vulnerabilities, right? There's also kind of a situation where you might be advertising your game, and you might know, look, there's some people that are just vain, and they're just going to interpret it that way, right? And it just might have this effect, but I'm not trying to change the way they think, right? I just know there's people out there, right? So in the way I see manipulation, it has to be kind of intentional. You can't accidentally. So
right. Although I think we still need to differentiate between what is manipulation and what is just persuasion.
So, right, the persuasion part is going to be I think a manipulation is a special type of persuasion. Right?
Okay.
The type of because I can give you lots of arguments to why you should play AC Valhalla, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I could give you reasons, and I'm persuading you, right? But that's very different than, let's say, manipulating. So think of another one of these seven deadly sins, envy, right? So let's say here I am, and I'm like, oh Jesus, it skips my mind. The big epic game starts with an F.
Fortnite?
Fortnite. Yeah, thank you. I can't believe it slipped out of my mind. Okay, so right, so let's say I'm developing Fortnite, and I got the basic skin, and I know some people are going to be jealous when other people have better skins. Um, but I'm not being manipulative by giving people better skins. Some people will buy skins because they're jealous of others. But if I intentionally make new skins, knowing that some players will be jealous, in order to use that jealousy to get them to buy, now I think I've crossed the line, right? Now I think you're intentionally playing on that weakness. Okay? So this is essentially either deception or intentionally playing on that weakness. Or lust is another one that this guy, lust wants instant gratification. So you kind of
Sure.
work with that, right? You give the player what
Right.
they want.
Right, and we do it all the time.
Right. So the question is going to be, and we can't look at every potential manipulation in this particular episode, right? But now let's talk about dynamic reward schemes. Dynamic reward schemes. So here's the idea, right? In a static reward scheme, so let's say I'm playing roulette and I put my $20 on red and it lands on red. We know what I'm getting, right? I'm getting $20, right? I'm getting
Right.
double, right? Or let's say I'm playing like an old school arcade game and you get an extra life at like 10,000 points, right? At 10,000 points, right? That's where it is.
And this is in the rules. We know exactly where it is, and it's always
coded
there.
in.
It's always there for everybody.
Yes, always there for everybody. It's right. It's static. But
Yep.
then you have this idea of dynamic pricing, right? So the way I normally think about dynamic pricing is, I don't know if you've heard, right? Like buying airline tickets. Like it's not a good idea to buy airline tickets on weekends, right? You want to buy them like Tuesday or Wednesday when the price is lowest. Essentially, they use dynamic pricing to they've calculated through algorithms what people are willing to pay, right? At what time. They also personalize this more these days. So, let's say if you look for a flight, but you decide not to get it, you might end up seeing lower prices next time you look, right?
Right.
And things like that happen on Amazon, right? Where you might get a better deal if you don't buy the product and then come back later. They might pitch to you a lower price, right? Sometimes it's rarer in normal situations.
And the thing is we never know when they're doing it. That's the big problem, right? It's completely opaque.
Right.
There's no transparency to this at all.
And very few people know that it really happens this way, right? I mean, if you pay attention to kind of news shows that talk about this kind of stuff, then maybe you'll get essentially some sort of understanding that in general, things like this, but it's totally opaque to us. We don't know what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And this is going to lead us to an interesting difference in games that we'll get to, right? So, okay, what is this dynamic reward scheme in games, right? So the idea is the more the game knows about you, right? The more the game could decide what rewards are you going to get? What is the game going to be like for you? So when you open a loot box, right? What are you going to get out of this loot box? Or when the potential for power-ups comes, what power-ups are you going to get? Or will you get power-ups? And the idea here is that the game could, using algorithms, getting the big data and information that they have, essentially change these rewards so that they're personalized to you, and they're personalized to you for the purpose of essentially cashing in as much as possible from you, right?
Sure. Because I'm the resource. I'm what they've sown, and the money from me is what they will reap.
Yes. Now, can you see before the negative, right? Can you see a positive about this whole idea of dynamic reward schemes? How it could be used for good?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think most of the effort in the game industry is using it this way. because there's so much competition between games, I want you as the player to have great feelings when you play my game. So the more I know about you, the more I can create, I can craft experiences that are personalized, as much as possible. I'm never going to personalize it for one person, but I am going to look at all the people who play it in this way and go, oh, these people, we'll call them, this type of player, type A. Type A players like doing this sort of thing. Let's make a bunch of rewards for that'll really satisfy them. And by satisfying, I mean make the game rewarding and satisfying to play, so that they'll come back and play it some more, and continue playing it, and play it even when there are other games out there that they could be playing, because I want them playing my game and not those other people's games.
Right. So everybody wins, right?
So everybody
when that
wins,
happens, right?
Right. Exactly.
And that's great, right? I mean, you can alter my game, right, in whichever way you think that will make me like it more, right?
Right.
Okay. So how can things go bad here, right? Is going to be next. So before I get to how I think, because I brought up this concern, should I do that, or do you want to say what you think?
Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
So, well, how could things go bad, right? So my concern here is essentially that the more, and you talked about, let's say, my type of player, and of course, you can put people into types, though the idea is the more data you have, the more granular you could be with this, right? And this is an infinite types as your algorithm can handle, and as your psychological theories can, or AI
That's
learning, right?
That's right. And we're constantly updating these apps. So, so a game that, if I want a game to live for 10 years, and a lot of games now do live for 10 years or longer online as these online games, I have 10 years to just keep working on these things and keep refining and keep refining and keep refining. So maybe I started with 3 different types of players, but now I've got 20.
Right. Okay. And now in the 20, I might fit really, really neatly into a category. Or again, if you've got 100 categories, right, I'm feeding it even more, neatly into it, right? And the worry that I have is essentially you're going to take all that information you have and that essentially you'll use it to squeeze more and more money from me, right? In a
Right.
way that goes beyond simply making the experience better for me, right? So the idea is, let's say you can have a dynamic reward scheme where it's guided by the idea that I'm going to do whatever dynamically will help you get a better experience, right? That sounds great. But once you move from that guiding principle to I will do whatever it takes to make as much money off of you, now I'm beginning to think that maybe I'm not getting the best game I can get. And maybe, in fact, I'm just being used. And maybe I could lose a lot of money if I get into this game. So, I want to give an example from FIFA. But before I do, one thing we've talked about before was the idea of the pinch. Right. So can you explain the idea of the pinch?
Yeah, sure. A pinch in a game is where we know that players are going to have a more challenging moment, and so we build games that have, as you play, they get more and more challenging. Ideally, you get more and more skillful as the challenge goes up. But what we really do is we actually do it in this sort of zigzag pattern. It sort of goes up and it drops down a little bit and goes up and drops down again, because this feels really good. You have these sort of stressful moments, and then you have this relief moments in the game where things are easy again, and then things start to get harder again, and then they get really hard, and then so it could be difficulty, or it could be in resources. Let's say it's a game where you're spending resources of whatever kind. It could be money, or it could be your health, or whatever, within the game you're spending this resource. And at some point, the pinch is, we know that you're at the most challenging part of the game, where your resources are the lowest, where you are struggling, where the challenge is highest, and at that moment, we can offer you a way to get to get through it easier.
Okay, right? And offer you away, right, means that, give you something that you could possibly buy, right?
That's right.
A
99
power-up that
cents.
could help you. There you
Yeah,
go.
power up that can help
Right.
us, extra health, extra money that you need it because you want to buy this thing and it's just out of reach. We know it's just out of reach because we know how much money you have, how much, gold coins or, apples or whatever it is that you're using for currency in this game. We know that you have 9 and you need 10. Do you want to buy 3 more? 99
Right.
cents.
Right. And you're helping me out, right?
And we're helping you out.
You're offering me a boost, right?
That's right.
And of course, it's a mutual exchange, right? You're making the game fun for me at the same time,
That's
and
right.
of course, you're making money for me. Now, the concern about the pinch, in places that I've read about negatively, is the idea that you can artificially create a pinch, and artificially create a pinch at moments that you think, given what you know about me, I'm most likely to spend the money, right? I'm more likely to spend money, and in fact, you can keep using the pinch on me, right? In whatever way potentially could maximize getting me to spend as much money, right? So the point is not that you're making the game more fun and you're giving me a hand when I need it, is that you're
Right.
intentionally making the game harder on me,
Right.
right? With my own enjoyment not being the primary goal, but rather making money from me. Now, I think about this. So, I read one thing about, so this is from Screen Rant's Cody Gravel, and, he was criticizing loot boxes in FIFA, right? And he says, players are routinely encouraged to spend obscene amounts of money on card packs to help build their ultimate team and recruit their favorite players. It's deliberately exploitative, preying on the fact that fans interested in the game are likely involved because they have a player they idolize, right? One that would inevitably be an expensive and rare option in Ultimate Team. The problem's only deepened by the fact that FIFA's loot box mechanic features abysmal gambling odds, with players extremely unlikely to find the players they want without spending some serious cash to do so. Now, he's talking probably generally about the players you want, right? Everybody
Right,
wants Messi, right? It's one of those things where everybody wants the best players.
Sure.
But
It's like at when you go to the fairgrounds and you're throwing ping pong balls into goldfish things to get your kid a giant bear. Your odds are terrible.
right.
And they're there to squeeze every bit of money out of you as they can before they give you a bear.
Right, or before you walk away, which is the much more common thing, right? Where you
Right.
won't get a bear, right?
That's right.
It's interesting. I when I was in high school, I worked at Magic Mountain at Six Flags for a while doing these things, right? So
Oh, yeah?
I remember especially there's the one with the bowling ball where you roll the bowling ball, and you have to get it kind of stuck within the valley. And there's a trick to it. You have to kind of put a backspin on it. Otherwise, you'll never do it, right? Now, notice in a lot of these games, sometimes there's a trick and sometimes it's just really hard, right? But where there's a trick, that's a situation of information asymmetry.
That's right.
Right? I know that there's a trick to it. To you, it looks pretty easy, right? There's a sense where I'm kind of tricking you into it, right? I'm deceiving you. Now, in this loot box situation, you have an information asymmetry, right? Electronic Arts can know a lot about. They obviously know the odds of the loot box, and I'm not sure if currently they're revealing what the odds are, or if we're still moving to that. But hopefully that will be the case.
In the case of FIFA, I don't know. In games that I play, the odds are revealed. So
Okay.
I know what my odds are. I may have to do some calculations to figure out what that actually means.
Mm.
It'll say you have a 1 in 7 chance of getting one of these things on a list, and then I'd have to count how many things on the list. If I want one, if there's a specific one of them, then I know that my odds are, 1 in however many things there are on the list times 1 in 7, which is that's math that most people are not going to do. Even though it's all completely out there and it's they're being completely transparent, They're just not presenting it in a way that's easy to digest.
Right, where they have digested it, or they are
Right.
digesting
Well, they
it, right?
absolutely have digested it.
So let's go back to the FIFA case, right?
Yeah.
So, right, let's say EA knows a lot about my preferences, right? They know my hometown, right? They know who are the stars in that hometown. They get my Facebook data. They know who I'm a fan of, right? And let's say I'm a fan of a certain striker. Maybe he's not a superstar player, but I really like that person, right? Then they can make it intentionally, artificially difficult for me to get that person, to keep me chasing and keep me spending more money on it, right? And let's say I finally get that person's a striker. Now they might know that I think that person really works well with a certain midfielder, right? Because I mentioned that on Facebook, right? I talk about how well they work together. So then I go chasing the midfielder, right? In the same kind of way.
And
Now,
and the nice thing is they've got this entire other organization called FIFA that actually tracks all this information too. So they don't even have to go very far to figure out who your striker works really well with. They just go to FIFA and find out.
right. Though, I might not know that. Right. So I might not be aware. So I might not chase it, even though it would be the best player for me to, play with.
That's right.
So okay. So there we have like what could potentially be information asymmetry, right? Sorry, not dynamic reward scheme with this information asymmetry.
Right, where they say, you have a chance of getting this thing, but the thing that you particularly like is lower chance than getting something that you don't particularly like.
Right. Though notice I don't know that, right? And this is kind of part of it, right? This idea of so we can look at it two ways, right? So this idea of manipulation, right? Deception or playing on my vulnerabilities. You might say this is you're playing on my vulnerabilities. You know this is someone I really like, and you know I'm likely to chase this person. By your psychological profile, you figured out that it's better to get me to chase than not to, right? Because I'm the person that would chase, right? Because you know enough about me to figure that I'm that kind of guy, right? So it seems like you're both deceiving me and playing on my vulnerabilities, and that just seems really wrong to me.
If they're not telling you what their odds are, if they're not telling you specifically what your odds are for anything that you want to do, they're absolutely deceiving you, and that would be, in my opinion, absolutely unethical.
Though, let's say what they're telling me. So in a typical loot box, let's say, I have a, X% chance of getting a good player, right?
Well, but that's not what I specified. I want to know
Okay.
for the thing that I want.
Okay.
What is I want this player. What are my odds? If they haven't given me enough information for me to be able to do the work and figure that out, and I may have to do the work to figure that out, then they are lying to us. They are being unethical.
So in this case, right, for the transparency to be the case, right, for them to be honest, they not only have to tell us what are the chances of getting a good player, a decent player, a weak player, right?
Right. Those things have to be defined.
Right. So I might say a good player has, these stats, they're over 80 at this, they're, over 60
Sure.
at this. Right. I can give you statistical thing, but you say you want more than that, right?
I want to know.
You want for every single player.
Because they know if they're talking about a good player, then they have a list of players that they consider to be good players. And that list needs to be transparent.
Right. Though now.
Right. So if my chances of getting a good player are this, I need to know what good means, and the good is very specific. It's a very specific list of players.
Right. Definitely. Okay. So now all this assumes, right? So once we get to the dynamic reward schemes, right? We're assuming now that they're looking for my specific player. Now, if I'm being charged extra for my specific player, then it should appear on the whatever information I'm being given, right? Exactly what
right.
my odds
So
would be.
What
And
what they consider to be good is based on what you consider to be good,
right.
but it should still be exposed to you in some way.
Okay. And if that price, so now comes the question of whether it's okay for those odds to change over time, right? Because this is where things can get interesting. So there's two kind of ways, right? One, whether if the odds change over time, that I should have a way of finding out what the odds are, right?
Right.
So we're
You
still
should
we're still staying with
at
that.
the basically the moment of purchase, at the moment that you're making the decision, you need to have access to that information. It can't be, here's what it was last week. Guess what it is this week?
Right.
That's not going to fly.
And it's preferably also in a way that's easy for you to access, right?
Right.
Because if it's a convoluted way and it's outside of the game,
right? It should be in the game.
Right.
It may be a little convoluted, like the example that I gave before. There's a list of characters or list of players that I have, and I have a 1 in 7 chance of getting one of these 31 characters, right? So what are your odds, right?
Right. Okay. Now, let's say you and I, are both fans, right? And essentially our psychological profiles are different, right? So it's figured out, we both like the same player, right? Or we like different midfielders, but we're both fans of the same striker. And Facebook even knows that. The game company even knows that. EA even knows that because they've got information from our Facebook posts, let's say.
Right. And they know everything about us. We'll just assume they know everything about us.
Sure, everything about us. Right? Now, they figure out that I'm the kind of person that would essentially buy more and more loot boxes until I get this player. But you're not, right? So they make the odds different for the two of us, right? Is that fair?
No.
Okay. Why do you think that's not fair?
Well, I should say, it depends. Like, if they're just moving, how do I describe this? If they're giving me more opportunities to get it because they're trying to entice me into being the kind of player that you are, because that would happen, right? The difference between you and I is they know that you're willing to spend money to get what you want. They know that I'm kind of not. So what can they do to entice me to spend money like you spend money? Maybe it's by dropping these high value players a little bit more frequently into my loot boxes when I buy a loot box, because it'll be more rewarding, and it'll be it'll entice me to become the kind of player that you are. Right.
So you get better rewards than me.
Right. I get better rewards than you for less money.
For less money, right? Though, this is it's interesting, right? Though the measurement of how much fun we have, right? Is not really what's at stake here, right? It's more of like how much money we're going to spend.
Well, right? But to a certain degree, they're hand in hand, right?
To a certain degree, right?
Because if you stop having fun,
right,
you're the one that they care about.
Right.
They care a little bit about me because I'm a potential you, but you're the one they care about.
Though I might just be after.
You're already spending money.
But I just might be after just this one particular player, right?
It doesn't matter. You're spending money. They love you.
It's nice to be loved, unless I'm not really loved. They don't love me. They love my money.
They potentially love me,
right?
But they really love you.
If
they want to make more of you out of me.
Okay. Okay. Now, notice all this kind of depends, right? Actually, let me ask you another question here.
Sure.
What if they told us, hey, look, we're being upfront. This game has dynamic reward schemes, right? Your chances of getting something depends on, well, it's very hard to put it in.
A huge list of things, right?
Right, but let's say, so it's interesting how you can do this and be honest. But, essentially, Depends on how much money we think we can make from you. Let's just say they're being honest with that, right? Is that still wrong if they're being honest? Notice now they're no longer deceiving us, right?
Right.
Is it still wrong for them to give us these two kind of prices for FIFA players?
I don't think it is. We put up with that sort of behavior from a lot of other industries in a way that nobody blinks twice at. And so I kind of don't. I kind of see it working the same way. Going and buying the same item in Beverly Hills versus going and buying it in Van Nuys, where I happen to live, sunny Van Nuys.
I went to Van Nuys High School.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's going to be a different experience, and you're going to be spending a lot more money if you go to buy it in Beverly Hills. Let's say you're buying a motorcycle. You're buying a Honda. You can buy it from Honda Van Nuys, or you can buy it from Honda Beverly Hills. Guess where you're going to spend more money?
Right. Right. And yeah, so in some sense, they're also localizing it to the populations, right?
They're localizing it to the population because
gas works that way too.
Because what do they know about the population?
They're willing
They know
to
the
spend more
population
money.
is willing to spend more money and unwilling to drive to Van Nuys.
Though, notice, right? Just to be clear about it, right? There have been criticism of this. It's not like this is a marketing scheme that does not have critics, right? Plenty of people have called this essentially immoral, right? Exploitative. You're getting more of them because you can. Now, I'm not. I have no idea what I think about it, right?
And we don't have, and it's hard to feel bad for the people of Beverly Hills.
But that doesn't mean this
general.
isn't wronging necessarily, right?
Right. But the solution is so simple too, right? If it didn't work, if it didn't work, they wouldn't do it.
Right. But that's a lot of times how exploitation. And again, I'm not saying this is exploitation, and I'm not really sure what I think about it. I think it's complicated.
Right.
But
but I think if they're being honest, going back to what you were saying, if they're being honest, if they're just saying, "Hey, look, we think that you're part of this Beverly Hills population of people playing our game, and we think this other person over here is the Van Nuys person playing the game," then and we're going to charge you more for everything.
Which is interesting about, whether that's fair or not, right? Because it's you've heard about like, some cities want to institute something like for a traffic ticket, right? If I'm a millionaire, right? Or whatever counts as rich today, right? Right. Getting a speeding ticket is meaningless, right? But of course, if I'm poor, it's a huge deal, right? So some people said what's really fair, right, is to do a fine as a percentage of, your
I'm
salary.
one of those people.
Right. Cool. Yeah. I think it's a super interesting idea. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a better way to kind of do punishment. And to go for fines in general in this way. But obviously there's disagreement about that. Can the same thing work then in games where you're like, okay, if you want to buy this particular player or this loot box, it's going to cost you more because we've determined that you make more money. Do you think it, especially, so do you think that's fair given that you think it's fair in real life?
So there's an interesting thing there because we're going to sort of step out of the magic circle, right? Now they know something about me, let's say how much I make.
Okay. Right.
They can't just generalize it that like, oh, you live in Beverly Hills, therefore you must make that.
Right.
They specifically know, they specifically have access to my bank accounts.
Or tax returns or something like that.
Or tax returns or something that would normally be
credit
secret.
Score.
Credit score. That's something available to people. They look me up on my credit score. And they're like, oh, his credit's really good. Let's charge him more. Or his credit's really bad. Let's make sure that we charge him more. Or I don't know. I mean, you'd have to think about like how you'd want to actually play that. But sure.
Right. It's interesting, right? I mean, bad credit might mean, tends to make bad decisions in purchasing, right? Easier to take advantage of. And remember, right? This idea of, right? And again, they could be straightforward about it, right? But we can still ask whether or not this is fair, right? And this is I was thinking about this especially with free to play, because with a game like FIFA, it's like, you know, we've already paid like $60 for it, right? And you think, oh, come on,
Yeah.
to
Why are they
then do
charging me
dynamic.
more money? They're gonna and they're gonna charge me $60 next year to get the updated FIFA.
Right.
So
So,
why are they doing this? Right.
and we're not just talking about why have microtransactions, because there's lots of reasons you still might have microtransactions, right? There's lots of things I might want to get that would make the game more fun, but they're not desperate. But if you have a free to play game, okay, I get it. You've spent money on creating the game, you've spent money on marketing the
Right.
game. You haven't made anything yet,
Right.
right?
So this is interesting because I now I want to flip it. Right. We were
Okay.
just talking about how they might know that you're a richer player than me,
Okay.
but now let's flip it. We're talking about two different companies. EA, which we know is a multi-billion-dollar company,
Right.
and some garage developer who's also making a game, and they're both doing the same practices. But EA, we're going to come down on harder because they have plenty of money. Why are they doing this? This other little company, they're just starting up. They're scrabbling. There's 5 guys in a garage somewhere.
Right. So we might excuse them because they need it for their basic survival, because they just don't have. Of course, that's a dangerous slippery slope. Right. I mean, and we're gonna we're gonna have another episode, I think, at some point about. So one thing about manipulation is, not all manipulation is bad, and there are things that I call redeeming features of manipulation, and at some point, I think we should talk about that and see how that could work. But I'm thinking that. Look, maybe a free-to-play company might be honest with their players and just say, look, just like that you might get a bunch of pop ads, or a bunch of different things that might be annoying. Hey, it's free, and this is kind of the deal, and you don't have to play the game, and you never paid anything for the game, right? So, do you think if that's the case, right? I mean, no, you can imagine people accepting this a lot more. If that's the case, would dynamic reward schemes be fair, because now they're not deceiving us, and it's in a situation where they're not where they have more of a need, they're not obviously exploiting us?
Yeah, and I think I know that you kind of like a black and white definition of fairness, but that's so hard to do. There's going to be some grayscales. It's like some things are going to be slightly more fair than other things,
Sure.
right? But yeah, I think that all of those things factor into our mental arithmetic that we do to figure out whether something feels fair or doesn't feel fair.
Right. Though, as we said last time, right? The developer thinks about, what feels fair to to the player. The philosopher thinks about what is fair.
What
right?
is actually
Right.
fair, right? And so I like to think about it like, are you being respectful? Am I, as a developer, being respectful of my players, or am I being disrespectful to them? Am I disrespecting their ability to make their own choices?
Great. And clearly, when you deceive them, you're doing that.
Absolutely. When you deceive them, you're doing that. Some games have come under fire because they've gotten you used to, like, they'll put the button that progresses you through ads on to dismiss an ad in the same place until you get used to it, and then they'll put the buy button there.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
And is there anything deceptive about it? Not necessarily, because if you're watching the screen, it's all right there on the screen.
You're
but
playing
it
on a
is,
vulnerability.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. You're building up an expectation and then undermining the expectation that you yourself have built up, and that's disrespectful.
Right. So again, right, if you think about it in terms of manipulation, right, you're playing up a vulnerability, right? You're creating this expectations. People are impatient and they're going to deal do it that way, and that they're going to accidentally do it. Right. And so you're manipulating that way. I really like that you put it into, because we didn't really talk about the wrongs of manipulation. And I think of, because I want to have more episodes of manipulation. I've published an article on manipulation and marketing before. I find manipulation super interesting. And I really love this idea that one of the things that's wrong with it, because it's really easy to focus on the harm that manipulation does, right? The first thing I think about is, they're going to part people with their money, right? And I think of things, I think of the student that told me, I can't believe I spent $200 last night on my game. I don't know what happened. Next thing I know, $200 were gone, right? And I think of those kind of harms that happen, or all those parents that have had kids that have spent tons of money that,
It's funny about that. I bet that there has not been more than 20 of them in the last 10 years. But boy, they get a lot of PR.
Good question. I really don't know. But I certainly worry about that with my son. But point well taken. Right, but
and it's good, and I expect it's good for parents to have these things like surface in the media, so that you're like, oh, right, this is something that could happen to me. I should pay attention to what my kids are playing and doing on their iPad.
Yes, though it becomes harder and harder, and yet another future topic for us.
right, and that gets us back to vulnerable
right.
groups, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and vulnerable groups and manipulation are really, a lot of times, can go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
But I do want to kind of I think finish up with this, like, stress, right? The stress and the respect. So the philosopher Immanuel Kant has this really great way of his moral system is based on the idea of human dignity and what it means to respect people, and he thinks that the what makes us really special, what is the basis of human dignity, is essentially our autonomy, right? Our ability to make our own choices. And this is one of those situations where, if you treat someone not as someone that can make their own choices, but as a thing to be used, right? That is the most disrespectful thing that you could possibly do, right? You're failing to recognize their personhood, right? And for him, this is the most disrespectful thing you can do, and manipulation does that, right? Right? I'm treating you as just a thing to be used for me to make money, right? And deception is my method, let's say, for doing that. Okay, let's end it on this, right? Play nice. You can subscribe and listen to all of our episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.